of becoming power is extinguished. Through the extinguishing of the becoming rebirth, jati is extinguished. And through the extinction of rebirth, decay, and death, grief, lamentation, suffering, sorrow, and despair are distinguished. Thus, comes about extinction of this entire mass of suffering. So this is very important message from Anika Jati Samsaram. This is very simple. All of the audience are very familiar to this Anika Jati Samsaram, right? So I think sometimes it is very important to focus this message when it comes to Paticca Samuppada. Okay, as I said earlier, I'm not going to go in a very detail on how the links, breaking the links in order to the end of the craving. Since my topic is dependent origination in the letter finger manual, now I would like to introduce the letter finger manual text. Actually, the letter finger manual text is a little bit complicated in using the number, how many texts have been named in the actual little finger manuals. The little finger manuals in Burmese we call Letna Atakata. Letna Atakata. So as an overview of the letter finger manual, according to Burmese traditions, letter finger manual, Letna Atakata, are well known to us for many centuries. These letter finger manuals are very useful to understand the original main text effectively. Generally, letter finger manuals have been composed by learned monks and ancient teachers in the olden days, especially the manuals that are relevant to the subject of Abhidhamma and Vinaya. So remember that we don't have letter finger manual for the Suttanta. Letter finger manual, the earliest of which are perhaps contemporaneous with Buddhaghosa, are compendia of either Vinaya or Abhidhamma, which appear to be gradually replaced the study of original text. So using the little finger text can be for the replacement to study the original text, because it's the key concept is there. There are no later Suttanta handbooks, probably because Visuddhimagga was composed as a definitive text in this respect. So I quote this from Oscar van Henubers in the Handbook of Pali Literature, but I also would like to highlight from more accessible in Burmese source from Nixaya. In other words, it seems that the summary of Abhidhamma, subject, and Vinaya handbook can be called manual as mentioned in the Paramattha Sankhepadika. Basically, the composition of letter finger manuals can also be classified into three categories: prose, verse, and mixture of prose and verse, Gatha and Joniya. The little finger manual should be short, but in complete account of essential meaning in summarizing the original text. Okay, this is from Pitaka Thamai, left Shan Atakatha in Tika, little finger. Actually, we have 9 little finger manual for Abhidhamma handbooks. But when we check the old Burmese Nixia, more than that. For example, in handbook for Vinaya, little finger manual for Vinaya subject, like Vinaya Vinichaya, Uttara Vinichaya by Buddha Dada, and Kotasika by Dhammasami, Mulasika by Mahasami. Only 4 that's accessible in handbook of Pali handbooks from Professor Hannibal. But in Burmese, Nixia, apart from the above mentioned, there are still several letter fingers have been mentioned by Sanlin Sayadaw in his Nixia of Abhidhamma differently for the development of Vinaya and Abhidhamma literature. It is said history there are 20 handbooks of Vinaya for letter finger manual for the Vinaya. Of course, for the Abhidhamma, sometimes 9, 7, 11, even more. Additionally, the letter Atakara, now I'm going to highlight how the word letter finger manual come to be. It is mentioned by Uyan, pointing out that the letter finger which precisely in a brief way summarize the important meaning of the text is called letter finger manual. Because this kind of text is similar to letter finger, as the text size is not tightening and length chapter is rather short. Moreover, some Asian teachers consider the Letdan letter finger. Letdan is in Burmese. Letdan was originally from Lek Chan. Actually, the text that regarded as little finger manual should be considered their important value, since they deserve special attention as a noticeable text. However, it is important to note that every summary of the text might not be called the letter finger. For example, Visuddhimagga is a kind of manual, but in the list of letter finger manual, Visuddhimagga is not included. Okay, now to save the time, then I'm going to highlight, like we have 9 letter finger manual and the Abhidhamma subject. So there are 9. Actually, when we try to find out in the old Nixia, there can be different way how the letter finger manual text classify. However, now the 9 letter finger manual become known, popular, only 9. So like we are closing down the list. So Abhidhammata Sangha by Acharya Anuruddha, Namarupa Paricheda, and Paramatha Vinichaya. The earlier Professor Shan just mentioned the 3 of these. So I'm not going to in a very detail, but the professor already mentioned how the Anuruddha have done these 3 letter finger manuals regarding the Abhidhamma subject. The 4th one is Abhidhamma by Acharya Buddha Dada, the senior contemporary of Buddha Ghosha, and Rupa Vipaka by the same author. So Abhidhamma and Rupa Vipaka, written by Buddha Dada. The sixth one is Satya Sankhepa by Ajiriya Dhammapala, probably Sri Lankan monk, different from Greek sub-commentators. And number 7 is Mohavichetani by Venerable Kassapa, South Indian or Sri Lankan, because there are different opinions regarding the original orders. And number 8, Khema Pakarana by Venerable Khema, Sri Lankan. And lastly, Namachara Tipaka by Sattama Jotipala, Burmese venerables. So now I would like you to highlight the 9-letter finger manual, the dependent origination in 9-letter finger manual. So even the topic is the dependent origination in the 9-letter finger Abhidhamma handbooks. So all the letter finger do not mention Paticcasamuppada. So obviously, the first 3, Abhidhammata Sangaha, Naba Rupa Paricheda, Paramata Vinichaya. Of course, the 3 texts is written by Anuruddha. So the first one, like earlier Professor Shan mentioned Paticcasamuppada. Even the chapter, like Abhidhammata Sangaha, everyone very familiar with this. So as a Abhidhamma student, we learn only Abhidhammata Sangaha. Okay, in few minutes, I'm going to try to finish this. So even we have 9 chapters, the Paticcasamuppada was mentioned in the 8th chapter 1, Paccaya Vipaka, the explanation of conditional relation. The chapter itself, it doesn't name Paticcasamuppada. And the third one is, the second and third ones also mention the Paticcasamuppada. For example, the second one, Naba Rupa Paricheda, Anuruddha classify the Paticcasamuppada in the 7th chapter. Except Abhidhammata Sangaha, Venerable Anuruddha composed only verses. For example, Nama Rupa Paricheda, 1,578 verses. No prose. Paramata Vinichaya also the same. Paramata Vinichaya also longer, over 1,000. 857. And also, Abhidhamma Vadara, okay, now the different order. So far, we don't find the Paticcasamuppada in the direct quote in the Abhidhamma Vadara, but in direct connection, for example, in the chapter 19, talking about the Visuddhi, the purification, also the Paticcasamuppada mentioned in this chapter 19. And also, Rupa Vipaka, no Paticcasamuppada, and also note the chapter for the indication. And Satya Sankhepa, okay, the Satya Sankhepa also mentioned about the Paticcasamuppada in direct way in the 5th chapter. So my point here is from the 9-letter finger manual, the Paticcasamuppada directly explain only the first 3 of Venerable by Anuruddha. The rest The rest letter finger manual, 6 of them indirectly, but sometimes we can find only the keyword avijja tanna upadana. Avijja tanna from time to time. Avijja tanupada. This word occurs from time to time in the whole, probably I would say the Abhidhamma and other like a Satya Sankhepa. And also, Mohavechetani. This is a very, Mohavechetani is composed, highlighting all the 7 texts of Abhidhamma. So we have Dhammasami, Thadukata, and all to Yamaka and Patthana. So chapter 7 texts of Abhidhamma, the Paticcasamuppada was mentioned at the end of the Dhammasami in Mohavechetani. So, for example, dependent origination found in the last chapter of Satya Sankhepa in the definition of Nibbana, 6 purification, and the analysis of purification indirectly, for example, like avijja, tanna, upadana, how they link, how they work, their functions, things like that. Okay, thank you. And also, before I leave this table, I have all the 9-letter finger manual. If some of you would like to study, and this is very old text, over 100 years published. So we just obtained this last month. Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much, Venerable Panyaboga. You are doing a great work on this Satya Sankhepa that is very little known. So now we will open for debate. Before that, I'd like to discuss something about what we are talking all the time about theory and practice. Actually, I think that means in Pali, pariyatti and patipatti. But actually, in my understanding, pariyatti means simply the acquisition of the text. That means acquiring the text by heart, learning it. And then the patipatti includes many things. We usually say that pariyatti is the study or the theory, and then the patipatti is practice. But the patipatti has to do with the attainments, and also it has to do with the magga. Now, if we consider that, what is samadhi, that would be right thinking or right theory, that is not part of pariyatti, that is part of patipatti. So sometimes, especially, I think there is a little bit of confusion when we are using terms that especially come from the Western tradition, like theory and practice, form and content, substance and quality. These dichotomies are not accepted in Buddhism. We should be aware of that. And there is a relationship of anyonya paccaya, anyam anyam paccayena paccayo. So, of course, pariyatti is related to patipatti, patipatti to pativeda. That is very clear in the tradition. It is very clear that the pariyatti means the remembering, acquiring the text. But then the patipatti, as I say, includes many things. With that, what I want to say is that when we say the theory of paticcasamuppada, that is not part of pariyatti. That will be also part of the practice. So it's very difficult to see where is the difference between theory and practice, especially in Theravada Buddhism, in that sense. So if we are using the term theory and practice from a Western point of view, I don't think it applies very well to this point, because what we call the theory of paticcasamuppada is patipatti. I know that might sound a little bit awkward, but it's not pariyatti. The pariyatti is simply learning the Pali text, but it doesn't mean that you understand. There are many cases where one can be a master of pariyatti without having any understanding of the meaning, because that comes with patipatti, which is progressively putting it into practice. That, of course, includes right physical practice, but it also includes right mental practice. That is patipatti. So when we are for instance, in an institution such as SSBU, and we are learning in a class about paticcasamuppada, one might say, okay, we are doing pariyatti. Actually, it's not true. We're doing pariyatti maybe the first 10 minutes when we acquire the text. But as we start thinking about paticcasamuppada, we are already in patipatti. And if someone is lucky enough to reach a full realization of paticcasamuppada, then that person has pativeda. So with that, I would like to ask the participants of this panel, what do you think, because the topic has been, I think, shared in different participants, about this difference between theory and practice. Well, as I said, to me, it's not very clear. I don't know if it applies or not to the Theravada discourse, and I don't know what you understand by that. So I would like to know your opinion, and after that, we will open the floor for questions. Thank you.
Yeah, I do agree, of course. I do agree. And I think that in the pattern that I showed with the pattern of the four truths applied to each of the links of the Paticcasamuppada, actually suggests the way the Paticcasamuppada should be read in many ways. So as a form, like the Four Noble Truths should be seen through Pariyatti, Patipatti, and Pativeda. So this is what happens. So by definition, the Four Noble Truths are object of Pariyatti, Patipatti, Pativeda. I do agree with that. There is also, it comes to my mind that in the Udana, in the Padma Bodhisutta and Dutiya Bodhisutta, the first two suttas in the Udana, they are about the Paticcasamuppada. And it is said that the understanding of the Paticcasamuppada is for one who is atapino jayato. So one who is jayato, sorry. One who is ardent, so who is striving in a way. Atapin is tantamount to effort, to making an effort, and jayato, to meditate, is the same root of jhana. So one actually requires, it is also explicitly said that one should require some level of samadhi. So they are strictly intertwined in a way. And the very reflection on that, I agree that it is already patipatti. So it's the path itself is, so patipatti means actually walking on the path, actually entering the path, patipada. And that path actually includes reflection. So I totally agree that also I would say the epistemological structure that we can have divided into theory and practice and so on may not apply to this context. And actually the very understanding, what we call the intellectual understanding, is already a step of transformation. So it's not so clear to distinguish. So maybe just when we acquire a text, when we read the text the first time, if we try not to be involved, maybe we don't have patipatti, we are only pariyatti. But it's a very subtle moment, I think, in a way, a very subtle distinction. And yes, I do agree that patipatti would include much more. All the philosophical reflection actually would belong within patipatti.
Regarding the pariyatti and patipatti, I also would like to go back to the origin of the word of the Buddha, Bahusana Hidaya, Bahusana Sukhaya. Actually, in order to understand the dependent origination, is everyone's. Bahusana, Bahu means as many. Bahu means many, not all. So, dependent origination, Paticcasamuppada, is for everyone who are ready to understand. If we are not ready, what I'm trying to say is, as long as we haven't put into the practice, I personally think even the word is Bahujana Hidaya, Bahujana Sukhaya, for the benefit of many, for the good of many. Maybe if he is not ready, if he hasn't put into practice, maybe the Bahujana Hidaya, Bahujana Sukhaya is not for him yet. So my point is, Pariyatti and Patipatti must go together. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Alice. That's a very interesting line of thought. First thing that came to mind was in the second series of metaphors that I put on the screen in my presentation, we have a metaphor for avidya, which is, avidya is like a, it's actually a little unclear whether it's a cataract or a blindfold that covers the eyes. The word is patalang. But in either case, the reason given for why avidya is like this cataract or blindfold is that due to its state of being of apatipatti or miccha patipatti, so either how we want to translate now, patipatti, or wrong patipatti. Now, it's very interesting, if we look at the translation of Visuddhimagga by Ñāṇamoli, he translates patipatti as ignorance here as no theory or wrong theory. So he seemed to have trouble with exactly this sort of semantic issue, understanding how avidya can be a part of patipatti rather than pariyatti. That said, however, I think we're seeing something at this stage of Visuddhimagga and these manuals, reference works of Abhidhammadaletan and such, which is really a different attitude towards doctrine. And this gets back to the point that Professor Asanga had made also about Paticcasamuppada, not being on par with the other factors of doctrine as something which gives rise to wisdom, as an object of contemplation in itself, like the Noble Truths or the Five Aggregates. However, in the Visuddhimagga, we seem to see a reframing of these things as exactly that. We see, this Panya Bhumi idea that the doctrine itself becomes the sort of fertile ground in which wisdom sort of spontaneously arises. So now it's doctrine that becomes the object of contemplation and that may give rise to wisdom. So there seems to be a shift in terms of what exactly is being contemplated and what exactly gives rise to wisdom. Is it doctrine that's being contemplated, or is it experience? So, at this phase of Visuddhimagga and on, it seems to be, perhaps one could make the case that doctrine has a more central place for giving rise to wisdom. One more point. Also in this period, we see this extreme systematization of the stages of insight that we're all familiar with, the vipassana jnanas and such. And in Anuruddha's works especially, we see that development of insight being narrativized. We see it turning into a dramatic sort of evocation of the realization within the mind of a sort of model person undergoing those realizations. So the whole process of realization becomes somehow narrativized. It becomes an idea, something you can read and sort of get a taste of as you're reading it. So this raises some interesting questions. What's going on here? Are works like this that turn the stages of awakening into a sort of model trajectory that we can sort of witness and read along with as these texts show them going through their progression and gradually towards realization. Are these functioning as now like some sort of blueprint for practice? Is realization being standardized such that this just becomes a more standardized blueprint? Or does a narrativization like this perhaps replace the actual realization that it's depicting? Is it becoming, simply more of an idea? What's going on historically at this period? Has this, complex fixing of the stages of realization such that it can now be depicted in this dramatic way that we can watch unfold, is that replacing, people pursuing realization itself? Or is it acting as a blueprint for them? It's an open question, but it's something that I think about when I see these clear, sort of highly codified, dramatic representations of insight unfolding.
It's great to learn from all our scholars, and I hope the audience has a better answer, but let me share some of my thoughts. Then I would say that theory and practice actually goes hand in hand, because nothing is possible without understanding or contemplation. We simply listen to the Dhamma talk, or we read some script or some teaching or whatever. Then we ask ourselves if we actually understand. So in order that we say we understand that and we get the point, we have to think back. We have to reflect. We have to relate with what we have studied before. In a sense, we would say it's a sort of contemplation. So, and another way, just as there is theory, which are the foundation or the basic for the practice, in another way, theories are also postulated through practice. For the Buddhist teaching came through the intuition, which is attained through the practice. So, whatever we do, we need sort of reflection or contemplation. So I think both are equally different. And in the case of the Paticcasamuppada as well, it is the point. It is like the criteria that we check with ourselves. Are we on the right track? So this is the rule, this is the principle that the Buddha has laid down, but we are there to reflect, we are there to contemplate so that we can put it into practice. So I would say that contemplation is essential and nothing can be achieved so that theory and practice are equally important. And there are many opinions, like sometimes there are practitioners who pay more attention to the practice rather than learning or the theoretical aspect. But from time to time, I think they also need the teaching or the theory. Maybe through the Buddhist teaching or through the meditation master who can put them on the right track according to the teachings of the Buddha. We need the guidance. So in that, we also need theory. So I simply understand that contemplation is essential. So both theory and practice are mutually dependent, and that they are supporting each other so that we get the real meaning or understanding or attainment that we are aiming for. I'm not sure if my thought answer your question. Thank you.
Yes, I definitely agree on that. Maybe my point, as Dr. Juliana said, was more fine point, very minor point maybe, but I think it is important if we are using English as a medium language here. Because the word theory means something, and the word Dhamma or Pariyatti means another thing. And the word Dhamma in India, or Dharma, is many times translated as law. And it makes a lot of sense. Like the Dharma Shastras are the treatises on law, and there is a reason why the Dhamma is called also law. You can call it the law of nature or whatever. Now, I don't think that we can say that the law is a theory, and then the people who follow the law, they are putting the theory into practice. It's a whole different thing. Like, the Dhamma is how things are. And it doesn't matter if you want the things to be like that or not, if you agree or not, but the Dhamma will be the Dhamma, it's a law. So following it is not exactly the same thing as putting a theory into practice or testing a theory or something like that. That might be helpful heuristically for practitioners and so on, I accept that. But since here we are having a kind of scholarly discussion, I wanted to raise this point. But now I would like the members of the audience to please ask questions. Sorry for intervening too much.
Good morning. My name is Utawin. Morning downstairs, Monstay. Question 1. First is Anulom Patilo. Question 2. Vedana Niyoda, Dana Niyoda, Prasatamabas to express the rules.
Anuloma and Patiloma.
Yes.
I think, Tagaji, you already know this. The ascending order and the descending or the reverse order. Ascending order means due to the ignorance, there is a mental formation, that is avijja paccaya sankhara. So in that we can connect this way, like the first two link, because we do not know this is something unwholesome, this is something not to be done, we have done many activities, we have accumulated many kinds of karma, both wholesome and unwholesome. Then, because of that mental formation, this sankhara, then we have this present life, we have vijnana. So we are born accordingly, and apparently because we have more merit in our past, now we are born as a human being, and we also have some kind of merit that give us support so that we can understand Dhamma to an extent. So they belong to the past. And beginning from this vijnana, this rebirth linking, or the beginning of this life, our life goes on. So since the beginning of this rebirth, vijnana, then we have both mind and body, nama rupa, right? So when a mind and body become together, nama rupa paccaya salayatana, then we have all the six senses. Then salayatana paccaya phassa, when there are contact with the external object, then we have this salayatana paccaya phassa and phassa paccaya vedana. So this is the ascending order. Yeah.
Yes.
So, yes, you know already.
Yes.
So what actually is your question between Anuloma and Patiloma?
Yes, Anuloma.
This is the Anuloma.
Yes.
Yeah, Patiloma, I mean, we Myanmar people, because you are also Burmese, I would give that example. Patiloma means going from the backward.
Yes.
Like we count 1 to 10, and from 10 to 1 or 0, this is the reverse order. That is the Patiloma. Yeah.
Yes.
And then Vedana Nirodha, Dana Nirodha. Yes, actually, when we talk about Vedana, this forms a very crucial link, especially in the Burmese tradition, that in the Mughal method, this is the exit.
Yes.
Right? So, your question is Vedana Nirodha, Dana Nirodha, with the cessation of the feeling, that is the cessation of the craving. So this is where we have to contemplate. When there is feeling, of course we have to know if there is happy feeling or unhappy feeling or neutral feeling or whatever, we have to understand and comprehend. Suppose there is no contemplation as such because of so much motivation or the forces by this Vedana, there is much more craving, and this craving accumulate clinging. Then that's why we have to try to exit at that point. That we know simply, because this is dukkha Vedana, we have to know this is dukkha, because it produces suffering. Nothing is permanent, in that we can relate to the anicca. Because it is impermanent, it produces suffering. Why is it so? Because it is non-self. So we can also relate in that way. This is so with the understanding, then we no more accumulate, we no more produce craving. So clinging also come to cessation. I hope it
Thank
answered
you.
yours.
Thank you. Yes, thank
Yeah,
you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have few comments and things, but I would like to begin with Alexis, your interesting remark on Pariyatti and Patipatti. It's really I really do agree with you when you say that this sharp distinction between Pariyatti and Patipatti as theory and practice is not there. However, having in spite of this basic agreement, when you look at the tradition, also particularly from the historical tradition, it's very interesting because we have had this Gantha Dura, Vipassana Dura from the very beginning. I mean, from the very beginning, I'm sorry, not from the very beginning, but subsequently, particularly when Buddhism reached countries like Sri Lanka, and there were, these two, fairly, but of course that doesn't mean that Gantha Duras were not practicing. But interestingly, in the Buddha Ghosha, there is this very interesting story. Now this one monk goes to Mahavihara and he sounds the golden drum in order to preach. Then the Mahavihara monks ask, okay, who is your teacher? Where did you learn these things? Then he said, I don't have a teacher. Okay, you are not permitted to preach here. Go and teach, learn first. So he goes back to this great teacher and learns the Pariyatti, Tripitaka. However, interesting thing is, having taught Pariyatti to this particular monk, the teacher sit down on a mat and say, you teach me now the practice. That's a fascinating story coming from Buddha Ghosha. This great Tripitaka teacher sits down on the lower mat and asks him to teach. Now you see, when you look at this kind of things, the tradition seems to be, although Granthadhuras were not complete